Great.
All right, perfect.
Cool.
All right, so yeah, I figured I had an opening statement I'll start with, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
First, I wanted to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to have this conversation with me. I mean, it's a real pleasure to meet you and have a conversation with an author of your standing. Um, as I said, I'm hoping through this conversation we can address and kind of find common ground on two things. The first was to kind of get your background and your experience on the traditionally published route,
Mhm.
and the second was to kind of bring about the discussion that implies that traditional publishing for an author grants a measure of success or results, as well as a level of action on the author's behalf.
Mhm.
And for a reader, from that perspective, that traditionally published books offer a level of quality that indie or self-published books just don't. Um, so, since we're
Sure.
on a time constraint, are you okay if I just dive into the first question?
Yeah, of course. Although let me first say as a codicil that I don't, oh, sorry, hang on just a
No, no,
second.
no, you're okay.
Let me so that you don't have to listen to my dings. So, I don't I should say right up front that I, as a reader, take me out of the equation as an author. As a reader, I read tons of self-published fiction, tons of it. And I don't think that it's always a question of quality.
Hmm.
I think that the difference is sometimes in channels of distribution, possibilities for channels of distribution. I also feel like you are only as good as the company that you're working with.
Okay.
And, although there is, of course, a huge difference between, say, an independent publisher and a vanity press, you are
Hmm.
still paying for services at an independent publisher. And you're only as good as the people who are working there, who are doing your editing and your marketing and your distribution and all of those things. So let's just start right there. But
Okay. No, no,
to
fair,
go
fair
back,
enough. And
first of all, I'm really old. So I got into this business 30 years ago. Back when I was in this business, I don't even, there was very little in the world of self-publishing. It was
oh yeah, yeah.
basically all like a vanity press, and that was it. Um, I think one of the things that a lot of people may not know about me is that I had over 100 rejections from agents. Over 100.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time, right? Like, I was sending out submission letters and queries just like anyone else who's trying to break into the business did. And it wasn't, I had zero connections in publishing. Nobody I ever knew had been a writer. My family did not come from writers. I mean, no one, none of that. Um, the leg up I had, and this was, I think, a real leg up, was that I was really lucky.
Mhm.
I was able to get into Princeton University, and in the 1980s, it was one of the um, only schools where they had a creative writing program at the undergrad level. Most of those happened at the graduate level. Now
Yeah.
you can work with authors, as an undergrad, but back then that was pretty rare. And so I got training from living, breathing authors who were being published, which was invaluable, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
got to write my very first novel basically holding the hand of someone who had done it before. And no one will ever read that novel, and we should all be really grateful for that. Um, but that taught me how to do it.
Yeah.
And that was a tremendous advantage. And when I actually started looking for agents, and I literally could not get an agent to save my life, um,
Yeah.
the woman who finally took me on was someone who had been working at a writer's series, had I had done a reading with my mentor from college. Her name is Mary Morris. She's still an amazing writer. And she had heard me there, and she was starting a an agency of her own. She had never done it before. And she said, I've never represented anyone, but I think I can represent you. And at that point, I was like, oh my God, yes, please. Because,
Get that heart beating faster kind of thing.
look, 100 rejections takes its toll, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah,
I
no,
mean, I went that route as well. I started querying. I queried probably about 35 to 40, and that's when I started talking to other authors. And that was not too long ago. I've only received back from 7 of them so far. So I imagine that I'm probably going to hit that 40 rejections, because from other authors that I've talked to, 40 queries is relatively small in the grand scheme of things.
yeah, I know.
So I imagine, but yeah, I decided to do self-publishing for two reasons. And I don't know if this resonates with you at all, but One of them was I had the expectation, as well as I think a lot of authors did, of how much marketing that they would do on my behalf. I mean,
Mm,
as well as the outreach, which I understand the outreach of traditional publishing is a massive help, but I also thought that they would do a level of marketing, like setting up book tours for me, so on and so forth. And the experience that I've had from talking to some other authors who were traditionally published, but then chose to go self-publish moving forward, was that there wasn't a whole lot of output from the agents that they worked with or the publishing companies they entered.
yep,
And, so for them, it felt like there was not as much return on investment. And as you said, at the beginning of this conversation, that it really depends on who you get and who you work with. And, I really imagine it's a case by case basis,
I agree. And
just like the decision you make to go traditional versus self.
absolutely. And for me, it's really a decision on timing, I think,
Yeah.
because I think you can get your book out a lot faster if you choose to go with self-publishing, some form of it.
Yeah.
And I think that if you want to go traditional, you probably will have to wait. I have friends who have been waiting for 30 years to find an agent,
Oh, wow.
but they want
Oh,
to go
man.
traditional, and so they keep on plugging away at it, and if the first book doesn't hit, they write another one. That's the way they're thinking of it.
Yeah.
What I will say is that I think that you're right. The world has changed a lot since I started publishing. I should point out that when I was a newbie author, even 30 years ago, nobody was paying for me to go on tour. Nobody really wanted to see me. I think that's still true. I have a really big following. I have had a lot of good luck in my career, but I've worked really hard too. And I was not an overnight success. I was not an Oprah pick. People are always shocked to hear that. They think I was, but it really was a matter of like the four people who read my first book told four friends, and then they told more people, and I kept exponentially growing a following as I was writing continually, and I was writing a book a year. And so I think that that assumption that you're going to have tons of money thrown at you for marketing, or you're going to be thrown on a book tour, that was not true back then. It is not true now.
Yeah.
I will say though that even new young authors who have a traditional contract are often sent to a couple of um, festivals, for example, where they might be on a panel, or they might be able to do a signing. And those are great, actually, because if you can be on a panel and people sit in the room and they hear you and you're super engaging, they want to buy your book, right? And that's
Yeah.
really what it is about. It's about finding your readership more than
Yeah.
anything else. And I
What?
do think that in some cases, traditional publishers are better served for that, only because the reality is that, like, I can't tell you how many books I get sent to Blurb, for example. And a lot of
Yeah.
them come from my publisher, and I do everything I can to try to help a new author, because I remember being in that situation. So if I have
Yeah.
time in my schedule, I will do that. I will try to give some kind of stamp, that says, "Hey, I read this. Hey, I really like this."
Yeah,
Um,
and give some kind of a review,
yeah,
which is awesome.
or
I mean,
like,
good for you too. I appreciate
right.
you doing that.
Well, look, I remember I really do remember what it was like, but I think that what's important is recognizing that my editor has someone on her roster who's never been published before. And she can come to me and say, "Hey, will you do me a big favor? We think this is going to be a really special book. Can you read it for us and tell us what you think? Or if you feel comfortable, put your name on it, with a blurb." And that, I think, is something that traditional publishing does give you, those
Okay.
relationships. Okay. So there are just different things. There are trade-offs in each one. Self-publishing is not easy because you're doing it all on your own. I
Yeah.
mean, I am the first person to tell you that. I have friends who self-publish. I am really grateful that I do not have to be the one organizing everything from my editing, my developmental editing, to my copy editing, to the design of the cover, to how we're going to market this book, to what the PR is going to look like. I really don't have to focus on that because I have a team that's doing it for me. And
Yeah.
the caveat to that, of course, is I'm not making the same royalty rate that you probably are,
Yeah.
right?
Well, so yeah, I mean, I think the royalty rates across the board get a little bit smaller over time. But I mean, yeah, that's and that kind of goes into the second thing as well. I mean, yeah, the outreach and the outlets that traditional publishing offers you is beyond compare. And I mean, you're basically buying into the experience that these people have. And as a self-publisher, you're kind of starting fresh, like a brand new company standing up off the ground.
Totally.
It's just a lot of stuff. And some people look forward for that. They crave that. They want to self-publish to build themselves up because
Yeah.
they feel there's a level of pride in that. I'm kind of that way. I want to do as much to my book as possible. I'm
Mhm,
learning Adobe InDesign so that I can format it. I'm trying to build a marketing strategy, and I think a lot of other self-published authors want to do the same.
mhm,
But there's also a level. I know I've talked to a lot of self-published authors. There's the level of control over your work as well that have
mhm.
kind of puts some people off. So I actually had a question in that respect, if you don't mind me asking. Um, Being traditionally published, have you ever had an agent or publishing company refuse to market or publish a book of yours that you really loved, or edited a book in a manner that you objected to without any kind of recourse?
So this is actually a great question because I think this is another really big difference between choosing to go self-publishing and choosing to go the traditional route. For me, I really crave having eyes on my story that are not mine. And I think when you do it all your own on your own, you do have all the control in the world. But sometimes, for me anyway, I have found that having different points of view and hearing people say, that made no sense to me, or you have a massive plot hole here, or something like that. They see things I can't see because I'm really like I'm my
Yeah,
blind
just
spot
so close to it. Yeah.
right? So I think part of the traditional publishing route is finding people that whose opinions you really trust,
Mm.
and their belief that the belief that I have that my story is just as important to them as it is to me, because they are the
Yeah.
ones taking a big risk on it, because they're putting all the money up really.
Yeah.
That to
Yeah,
me
it all comes down to marketability. I'm taking a risk on you. I need to make
exactly.
sure that it's going to pay off. And like you said earlier, it's
Yeah,
all about like, how do they do in front of people? Like,
yeah,
am I going to run into an issue with this person? So on and so forth.
yeah,
Let's see how they interact and how
right.
much of a crowd they draw.
Right. And I mean, the interesting thing that you're saying though about like, is there something that they wouldn't have published? I write some really difficult stuff. I write some very controversial stuff.
Yeah.
And I have never had a publisher say to me, "Oh, nope." Like I went into a publisher once and I said, "Okay, so this novel is going to have a comic book embedded in it." And they were like, "Great." I went into a publisher and I said, "This is gonna be printed with a CD of songs," because that was back when we had CDs,
Right.
and,
Right.
and each of the chapters is gonna be a track title, and they were like, "Okay." And they were absolutely willing to get on board with me because I could convince them that this was going to be unique and interesting and different and serve the story. So, I
Okay.
haven't had the experience where they've turned me away. Now, many, many years ago, I was in a publishing company where I was told, yeah, I don't remember what it was pitching, but it was some idea, and my editor said, "That's really great, but maybe you could write about 3 women who meet in a hot tub and find out they're dating the same guy." And I was like, "What?" And, and I actually wound up leaving that publisher. And that okay, so that's the other thing about having an agent and the traditional model. So
Right.
every time that I have not felt like my interests are being served by a publisher, my agent has gone out to editors that she has connections with to say, Jodi is looking for a new publisher. Have you read her stuff? She's the one doing that groundwork for me.
Yeah.
And an agent sometimes becomes bad cop when you need to be good cop. If there's something that an editor says that I don't agree with, but I don't really feel like souring that relationship between us, I can have my agent step in and say, okay, this is a point of contention.
Hmm.
She's getting paid for it. She gets paid a percentage of everything I make, and that's
Yeah.
why she does. So again, it's about having people around you, instead of being a one woman band.
Yeah.
Um, I have people who are all playing. They're playing sheet music that I wrote, but we're all playing it in unison. And to me, that's the kind of sound that I want.
Okay. And yeah, absolutely illustrating the point of how important it is that the people around you have just as much faith in your work as you do. I mean,
Yeah.
as us authors, we're not going to pitch out something and really put ourselves out there
Mhm.
unless we have that faith in it, whether it succeeds or not. We have, a belief in that.
Right.
And having an agent that supports you is just
Huge.
massively helpful. I agree with you completely.
And she's been
I
my agent
am I am
for years.
curious on that front because I'm not traditionally published. But I have heard other traditional publishers, where they have abandoned their agent, found another agent if it's just not a right fit.
Mhm.
I mean, have you gone through that process? How complicated is it?
I haven't. I've had the same agent for over 30 years,
Oh, wow.
who took a chance on me.
Yeah, that's
It's
incredibly fortunate. That's good good for you.
Yeah, but it's like, I mean, I know other people who've left agents and have had to find others, or their agent retired or something, and I'm really fortunate that I haven't had to do that.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I imagine I think it's hard no matter what. What I will say is I've left multiple publishers. I used to call myself like the great publishing whore because I think I've been everywhere. And, and it's for different reasons. One time it was because my publisher had an idea about what I should be writing that I didn't want to write. Another time, I was publishing at William Morrow when HarperCollins bought it,
Yeah.
and you were probably not born yet, but they had like they canceled all these fiction contracts that they had. And even though mine wasn't one of the ones canceled, I was like, "Ooh, this is a scary place to be right now. I don't
Yeah.
feel comfortable here." And so I jumped ship again, and I wound up at Simon and Schuster, and I was there for 13 years. And things were that was literally the company that built me as an author.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I got to a point where everyone was like, "Yeah, this is good enough. This is great." And I just didn't feel like they were, again, that team surrounding me. I didn't feel like they were working as hard as I was, and that I wasn't comfortable with that. So I moved over to Random House, and I personally do believe that my team at Random House is the best in the business. I just love them, and I am really fortunate to be there right now.
That's awesome. And I mean, you definitely have had a path to get
Yeah,
there. And,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's no fun, but I'm glad you found your place.
yeah,
But that, for me, again, going back to self-publishing, that's one of the reasons that I wanted to do it is I had those kind of like, I don't want to call them superhero stories, but those inspirational stories,
yeah.
things like you go back to like the 1900s with Beatrix Potter,
Mhm.
um, barred from traditional publishing
Yeah,
because simply the fact she was a woman. And, so she goes out and she self-publishes the Tales of Peter Rabbit. And then a publisher approaches her, and that's how she got her start. Same with Andy Weir and The Martian,
yeah,
or
right.
Amanda Hocking, or
Mhm.
Colleen Hoover. I mean, there's a lot of those stories, and I think they kind of like bore into me.
Okay, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So I want to know about that because I mean I do know, I know you're happy self-publishing. I do know a lot of people who are very happy self-publishing.
Yep.
But the people who really make it big in self-publishing, the Colleen Hoovers, the Sarah J. Maas's of the world,
Yep.
many of them then go on to take a traditional publishing contract.
Yes.
So why?
So, I haven't talked to them, and I haven't done too much research on that,
Yeah,
so it's purely speculation. But I do imagine that once you get to a point where, I mean, Amanda Hocking, as an example, had 17 books that she self-published, sold millions of copies. I imagine that her plate got full. So eventually, you want to delegate out to a manager of some sort to, kind of help you shuffle around that, and having a team definitely helps.
yeah,
And, again, I'm not anything against traditional publishing, but for me, it's the entry fee. I
yes,
have heard that like a lot of studios and publishing companies won't talk to you unless you are an agent or you have some kind of footing
mhm,
already in there. Because again, it goes back to marketability. They want to make sure that you have that reputation and that you're not going to disappoint. So I think on that respect, it helps. My stance on self-publishing comes at the beginning.
mhm,
If I'm going to start with an agent, I'm going to start with a publisher, and I'm still going to be primarily doing things on my own. Well, then I could go the path of Andy Weir or Beatrix Potter or any of that, and it just kind of put my own foot forward.
mhm,
And yeah, it's me out there. I'm on an island. I've still got my beta readers. I've got my little indie support crews and stuff like that that I really appreciate. But at the end of the day, for me, there's a level of pride. And if a traditional publisher comes to me and I've already done all of this on myself, there's a measure of leverage that I have to get a deal that I feel is really right for me.
sure.
And that's kind of
You're
my
coming
approach
in,
to that. But
well,
again,
and I
there are several
yeah.
authors that want to stay self-published just to maintain that control.
Right. I will also say, and I think this is really important for people who are being self-published, that what I have seen happen in the traditional publishing world over, say, the past 10 years or so, with the rise
Mhm.
of social media, is um, publishers who are willing to take a chance on a new author are looking for them to have a following,
Yes.
right? And so that's the social media thing usually. How many Twitter followers do you have? Or um and I don't know how much of that translates, but I think they feel like it's easier to market a book when you have a built-in audience, obviously. I mean,
Oh
that's
yeah, yeah,
true of anybody. So I think that to some extent, what you're saying is you're using self-publishing to build that audience for you so that if you move into traditional publishing, you're going to get a deal that reflects some of that, which is
yeah,
completely
and
legit.
absolutely turn down something that doesn't fit,
Right.
my beliefs, my morals, doesn't give me the control I want, so on and so forth. And
Right.
that's my approach to it. Yeah.
And I think that again, there's a trade-off no matter what you do in publishing. Like I said, to me at the beginning, it's for self-publishing versus traditional, it's time versus money.
Mhm.
Because if you want to go the self-publishing route, you're going to do it well, you are going to have an initial outlay of funds that you hope to recoup once your book is out there selling.
Mhm.
And for me in traditional publishing, I actually get paid before the book is even out.
Yeah.
And, granted, when when I was starting out, I wasn't paid enough for groceries, you know, but it was still a payment. It's an advance on sales.
Yeah.
And so there's an outlay being made to you by an entity, by a corporation, based on the fact that they think you are going to earn out eventually and make royalties. And, so again, the difference is if you're going to go traditional, it's going to take you a while to get that agent and to
Yep.
get that agent to then submit to the publisher and the publisher to be interested, and all of that is completely legitimate and very true. And what you said is right. Even now, if you went as an individual and sent a manuscript to Random House, it would wind up in a slush pile and likely would not get read. You
Yeah.
really do need an agent. And so, you have to follow the steps of traditional publishing if you're going to be allowed to play in the arena of traditional publishing. But that is a time issue as opposed to a money issue. And in self-publishing, the time is gone. You can do whatever you want on your own schedule, but you're paying up front and hoping you're the one taking the risk and hoping that you're going to recoup that.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And since, as you said, the time is yours, you can follow your own schedule. I mean, your output dictates your results from that too.
Yeah.
So yeah, as I said at the beginning, self-publishing is definitely not for everyone.
Mhm.
And as you said, I mean, it's not easy. It requires a lot of work.
Right.
And so I think that just managing the expectations of just, hey, if you do go into self-publishing, if this, depending on what your goal is, if you just want control, you don't care about sales, you don't care about royalties, whatever, have at it, or if you want to have this as your end goal, these are the things you need to understand that you need to do yourself.
Mhm.
And if you're not willing to do that, if you're not willing for that, then maybe traditional, waiting for finding the right agent and going the traditionally published route is the right course of action for you.
I think a
And
couple of other things are really important. One is that there are genres where
yes.
it is harder to even get a traditional publishing contract. I
Mhm.
think romance and fantasy are two genres that are like that, where we have more stories than we have available slots, basically in traditional
Yeah,
publishing, or even like imprints that focus on that. And so I
yeah.
think that's one of the reasons that so many people who write in those genres do go the self-publishing route. And
Mhm.
and I understand that completely, because if there isn't even a traditional path for you, that becomes really, really difficult.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And wait, I've completely forgot what my other thing was that I was going to say. Maybe it'll come back to me. But I do think that that's it's worth acknowledging that. Oh, I
Yeah.
remember what it was. The other thing is that I think you also have to ask yourself when you're making the decision about self versus traditional, what is your end game? Because there are people, if you just want your book out there and you want to find your audience, then it's going to be hard to do with self-publishing. I think it really is, but you can do it. And I don't think everyone is a success in self-publishing, but there are success
Oh
stories.
yeah.
Um, but I will also say that even some of the biggest success stories don't translate into what would be considered a mark of traditionally published success. So, for example, you get an author like Jen Armentrout, who is a bazillion copy seller, right? Who writes romantasy, and she will be completely ignored by the New York Times list.
Yep. Because
And
you have to
so,
be traditionally published to be accepted on that.
even so, look, I'm traditionally published, and they have the weirdest, fuzziest math ever, and it doesn't make any sense. But that said, at least at least I'm traditionally published. I already have one foot
Right, right.
one foot in there, and I think that's something that you know, it's just something to consider. If that's something you're looking for, do you want to be a New York Times bestseller? You don't have to be. You can
Yeah,
let me tell you this magical thing. If you sell the book, you still get the money. It doesn't really matter if the New York
right,
Times
right,
does,
right.
but
But it's that level of acclaim that you get and that kind of feel good and
yeah.
pride and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that is something to consider because there definitely are biases around, self-publishing versus traditional publishing, and
yeah,
there are a lot of people in traditional publishing who automatically assume a self-published book is crap. That is not necessarily true, but I'll also say there is a lot of crap out there.
yeah.
And I
Oh,
will
yeah,
also say,
absolutely.
guess what? There's a lot of crap in traditional publishing. So,
Exactly.
like, I mean, you could say that of both sets. It just is there are caveats to both. And
Yes,
I think
absolutely.
that's what's important. And the other thing is my whole thing, that my first video came about because in 1 week I had two different companies that call themselves indie publishers who went to there were two novice authors who would talk to these two different publishers, and in two cases they were told that they had worked on my books.
Yeah.
Total lie. And so, there is this caveat emptor thing. If you are going to go the route of self-publishing and you are doing it all yourself,
Mhm.
you'd better do your homework
Yeah.
because there are vanity presses and there are like scams that are masquerading as independent publishers or hybrid publishers. And
Yep.
if you're going to be putting your own money out, you're going to lose that money basically.
Yep.
It's not worth it. The one of the beautiful things about Random House is everybody knows who Random House is.
Right, exactly.
Like it's kind of they already have their brand
Yes.
because they've successfully done this for hundreds of
Yeah,
years.
and their legitimacy is verified. You don't have to, kind of jump through the hoops. You're like, "Oh, hey, this is Random House. I know you. I see you on tons of
Yeah,
books," and so on and so forth.
but it
And
really
I do wanna clarify because I know there are vanity presses, and
yeah.
early on in my career, I wrote a book, that I ended up just giving to my wife. I wrote a book for my wife for our anniversary, and I was like, "You take it. I don't wanna hear your feedback on it. It's not good, but
Mhm.
it's for you, so I want you to have it."
Yes.
And even though I had told other people about it, as soon as I started mentioning that I was writing a book, even though I had no inclination to publish it at all, I started getting approached by vanity presses. And, at the time I wasn't interested, thank God, because it gave me a chance to do my research and
Yeah.
find out the schemes that's behind it. So I just want to clarify when I'm talking about self-publishing, I'm talking about, just me not going to any other company. I'm posting to what KDP or Ingram Spark, whichever one I deem is, meeting the goal that I want. I'm finding my own book cover designer. It's just me. And I think that's what a lot of self-publishers are also talking about as well. So I just wanted to clarify that. But
Yes.
another thing, another big draw for me for self-publishing was going back to my childhood hero dreams. Two of my biggest inspirations I found were originally self-published, which is H.P. Lovecraft,
Yeah.
who self-published his own magazine called Weird Tales back in like 1917.
Yeah.
And he went along with that until 1923 when he finally got traditionally published and was able to put his stories out there. And he's created this whole new subgenre of Lovecraftian horror that, I just feel like, and again, maybe I'm wrong, but a lot of the times traditional publishing, because it's all based on marketability, they might restrict some new voices and new stories if they seem a little too risky.
Mhm.
But the other one is Stephen King, which I was surprised to learn that in 1960, he actually started his own self-publishing company called
Mhm.
Tirade and Gaslights Books, I think is what it was called. And, which eventually led to Carrie, which eventually led to him selling his rights and becoming just like this author that I don't think you could meet a person on earth who doesn't know who Stephen King is. So that to me was the big inspiration. That was my draw. And, it likely will never happen. I don't think that I'm at all at the level of writing that they are, but it's still a nice dream to hold on to. And it kind of fuels my passion and my drive to market myself and really put myself out there. And
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of other self-published authors have stories like that that have given them that inspiration to make that decision, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
And you know what? Publishing is hard. It is hard no matter what way you do it. It
Yeah.
is even hard now, 30 years into it as a bestseller. There are
Right.
always things that are difficult. And they change. Publishing changes literally from one book to the next. I find changes in the industry.
Yep.
So I think everything you're saying makes sense. Everyone's going to have to figure out for themselves what is right and what is wrong. I do not, I do not, and I never did believe that self-publishing is a terrible idea. I just think it's very hard.
Yeah.
It's quicker, and a lot of people assume that because it's quicker, that makes it easier. That is not true.
Okay, that's fair.
That's very
And
fair. And I
yeah,
also
so I imagine yours was kind of like a warning, like, hey, it's
yes.
not for most people.
Yeah,
Most people will not have that drive, determination, whatever, to
no.
make it happen.
I think that's very true. I think you really have to work really, really hard. The alternative is you have to continually run your head into a brick wall, hoping that you can finally get an agent. So both of those paths are difficult in
Yeah.
different ways. That's all. And I think that like you said, it's going to be up to each individual to figure out what works for them and why.
Yes.
But if and as someone who has not self-published, I am in awe of the people who could do all those things because I don't want to and I can't. But I just think that there are, especially right now, there are a lot of people out there with stories to tell.
Yes.
And there are a lot of predatory companies.
Yes.
And I think that, for me, I'm so angry as an author that they're using my name.
Oh
Like
yeah, absolutely.
I call my agent, I'm like, well, what can we do? And she's like,
Like,
nothing. It is hearsay. And
let's
I'm
make
like,
it stop. Come on.
yeah, I don't want them. I don't ever want anyone who is trying to get into publishing hearing my name and thinking, well, this must be good.
Yeah.
It's not true. So that really, really upset me. And and so I mean, whatever misunderstandings were going on in the videos that I left behind or the comments about it, um, it sprang from that place for me of really not wanting someone else to be hurt because of a lie that had my name attached to it.
Yeah, you were putting out, and I think I said that I don't think you had any malicious intention.
No,
You're putting out a video to try and help other authors to realize, hey, there are companies out here that will
yeah,
prey upon your dreams and your desires and put you in a position that's
yeah,
probably not ideal for you.
yeah,
And I try to do that as well with my page. I don't know if you've looked at any of my videos. I try to push out there like, hey, here's some information I have that might help you.
yeah,
And I try to always say, do your research
yeah,
to the best
exactly.
of your ability, because that's where it really matters.
Yeah,
Everything's a case by case basis. Not everything is a one size fits all.
right.
So yeah, I completely understand it. And as you said, the world of social media is a very knee jerk reaction place. And
And
that's why I
TikTok
kind of
is
reached
really
out to you, and I
scary.
wanted to have
Yeah,
that's why I wanted to have this conversation, is to
yeah,
just kind of eliminate that knee jerk reaction
yeah.
and have a conversation just
I
like
really
this, a
appreciate
civil
that.
dialogue.
Honestly, this is the thing that makes social media hard. You can't have this kind of nuance in social
Yeah.
media. And also with TikTok, if you listen to the first 10 seconds of a video, but you don't listen to the rest of
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
it.
And you look at the analytics, like the retention, you go and it's like, oh, hey, they listened for 3 seconds and then it just
Yeah,
plummets.
exactly.
Nobody stuck around for the end of the video. No,
Exactly.
I completely understand it. And kind of going back to a point you made at the beginning that, social media has become this big thing. A lot of people look for your social media presence. I personally hate social media. I only made a TikTok. I only made Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff
Mhm.
because I was told that it's a necessity. And I did all that to build up before I started querying. And
Yeah.
then I just got to the point I was like, what am I doing? I'm doing all of this for this when I could just do this myself and
Mm.
hope for the best. I mean, I got a family. I got 3 kids of my own.
Oh my
I just
gosh.
yeah.
Well, and then, but the truth is, even if you are self-published, you still need that. You still need that
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
to find your
So
audience.
if I'm already setting the framework,
Yeah,
let's
exactly.
just see what I can do on my own. And then, as you said, the schedule's in my own hands, but my output will be my result.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't turn out to anything, like I said, I got a family and 3 kids. I'm still working full time. I've got a good job,
Right.
and I just want to get my stories out there. If that means that I'm not making any money off of it, as long as I'm not losing money, that's my big that's my
No,
big
totally.
concern.
I totally get
But
that.
yeah,
And
it's
tradition
and I think that
right.
you and I both have, and most authors in general have that common ground where we just want to put a story out there
Yes.
that excites the reader's imagination, makes them think a little bit, and just kind of, I don't know, changes their lives maybe, hopefully.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the only reason I'm still in this business after 30 years is because, you know, I mean, I get a lot of hate mail, but I also get some incredible mail from people whose lives have been changed because of
Yeah,
what I wrote, and that's an amazing thing,
yeah,
especially in a world like the one we're in today. If you're there creating stories that entertain or distract or let people escape for a hot minute,
yep.
that's a really worthy goal.
Well,
So,
especially with the stories that you write, which really tug on the heartstrings of people and talk about subjects that are very close to home for a lot of people. I
I
imagine
agree.
that you get some very touching mail, and stories from people that are just like, "Hey, your story really hit home,
Yeah.
and, thank you for that," kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think, one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you too is because first of all, your level of discourse was so polite and kind that that was important, especially for social media.
Right, right.
So that we are like as authors, we're in this together. I've been very vocal about book banning, which is epidemic in this country right now.
Yep.
And instead of infighting among authors, let's keep our eyes on a goal here. Because the
Mhm.
reality is that those genres that I was talking about, those romance genres, those romantasy genres, fantasy,
Yeah.
those are the books that are being banned. A
Yes.
lot of those books, a lot of books by BIPOC authors, LGBTQ authors, those are the books that are being targeted. Anything with mature content or anything that has to do with race or sexuality or gender. And um, that is going to hit both self-published authors and traditionally published authors.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Hell,
so,
that's my personal level of success is
yeah.
if I write a book that one day gets banned, I know I made it somewhere.
Oh, be careful what you wish for, my friend.
Oh, I know. But I'm kinda like with you and with Stephen King, obviously I go back to him, is just if they ban a book, that's one you should go buy and read immediately, you
Right.
know?
We
Absolutely.
unfortunately, we got to make sure that kids are able to read widely and to,
Yes.
to be able to see a world outside of the one they live in. So anyway, that's the other reason that I really did want to talk to you because I felt like it's really important to remember that there's a really big battle going on right now in the world of
Yeah.
publishing, and that's the one that we should all be fighting together. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And social media kinda has a way of
yeah,
was supposed to bring people together, but it just kind of dehumanizes people in a sense. And I want to get away from that. So my entrance to social media, I wanted it to be more purposeful than just building a following. I wanted it to kind of try and bring people together. So again, I really do. I did not think you were going to respond. So I'm really grateful that you did. And it's really just been an absolute pleasure getting to meet you and talk to you and kind of, expand on this issue and
yeah.
find that common ground.
Thank you for that discourse. It was a really good one. I really appreciate it. I wish you all the luck, and
Thank you.
especially with 3 kids. I know what that's like.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, and, who knows, maybe one of these days I'll be traveling around and I'll run into at a convention or a book
That
fair
would
or
be
something.
awesome. Well,
That would be
definitely. I
great,
hope we'll
yeah.
say hi. Well, thank you again for this chat. This is great.
Yep, not a problem.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.